The massive space station hung in the void like a metallic flower, its petals stretching out toward the stars. Kepler 442b rotated slowly below, its blue-green surface reflecting the light of its distant sun. The Galactic Council Station was the largest structure ever built by any known species, a monument to cooperation that had taken 300 years to complete. Today, it served as the stage for the most important military gathering in galactic history. Admiral Kriegstall stood before the massive viewing screen in the central chamber, his crystalline form catching and refracting the light into rainbow patterns. Across the walls, the Zephyrian leader's voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, though his words carried the weight of absolute authority. Behind him, holographic displays showed the pride of the Zephyrian fleet, 12 massive dreadnoughts that seemed to be carved from living crystal, each one the size of a small moon. "Behold the eternal fleet," Kriegstall announced, his arms spreading wide as the images rotated to show every angle of the magnificent vessels. "Our ships exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When your primitive weapons fire upon them, they simply phase into the quantum realm, becoming untouchable." He gestured, and the hologram showed a Zephyrian ship flickering like a ghost, as enemy fire passed harmlessly through its hull. "We have mastered the art of existing and not existing at the same time." The other alien representatives watched with barely concealed envy and fear. The Zephyrian technology was indeed impressive, but each species had brought their own nightmares to display. War Commander Thalax of the Vorthan Empire stepped forward, his biomechanical armor writhing as organic components shifted beneath the surface. The Vorthan was a massive creature standing nearly 3 meters tall, with living metal flowing like liquid across his body. "Phase shifting is a clever trick," Thalax rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "But what happens when your enemy cannot be avoided?" His massive hand waved and new holograms filled the chamber. The Vorthan bioships looked like enormous sea creatures crossed with mechanical nightmares, their hulls breathing and pulsing with life. "Our vessels are not built, they are grown. They feed on enemy ships, consuming their hulls and growing stronger with each battle." The holographic display showed a Vorthan bioship extending tentacle-like appendages that wrapped around a smaller vessel, dissolving its armor and incorporating the materials into its own structure. The ship visibly grew larger and more heavily. Armed as it consumed its prey, each battle makes us stronger. Each victory feeds our fleet. We are not warriors who fight. We are predators who devour. Hive Mind Unit 7 of the Nexari Collective flickered into existence, its form shifting between states of matter as it communicated through rapid bursts of light. The Nexari were energy beings who had learned to inhabit mechanical bodies, and their representative appeared as a constantly changing geometric pattern of light and shadow. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Individual strength is meaningless," the Nexari declared. "We are unity, we are infinite." The chamber filled with the image of space itself seeming to come alive as millions of small ships moved in perfect coordination. Each vessel was no larger than a fighter, but they moved like schools of fish, flowing around obstacles and reforming into new patterns with frightening speed. "Our swarm ships think as one mind. They learn from every engagement, they adapt to every defense. One ship is nothing. 1,000,000 ships are unstoppable." The display showed the Nexari swarm descending upon a planet, the individual ships working together to dismantle its defenses piece by piece. Some ships would sacrifice themselves to create openings for others, while damaged vessels would merge with nearby units to continue fighting. It was warfare elevated to the level of art, beautiful and terrible in its perfection. Admiral Zephyra of the Korvaxi hegemony materialized from what appeared to be empty space, her form bending light around itself in ways that hurt to look at. Directly. The Korvaxi had learned to manipulate space-time itself, and their representative existed partially in folded dimensions that allowed her to appear and disappear at will. Her voice seemed to come from inside the minds of everyone present. "You all think in terms of ships and weapons," Zephyr said, her form rippling like heat waves. We think in terms of reality itself. The chamber suddenly felt larger, as if the walls had been stretched to accommodate impossible distances. Our vessels do not travel through space. They reshape space to bring their destinations to them. The holographic display showed Korvaxi, ships that looked like geometric impossibilities. Their hulls folded in ways that suggested they existed in more dimensions than the eye could perceive. One ship demonstrated its capabilities by creating a gravity well that pulled enemy vessels into crushing embrace, while another opened rifts in spacetime that allowed it to strike targets from impossible angles. We do not fight battles. We rewrite the rules of existence itself. High Ethereal Veltar spoke last, though speaking was not quite the right word. The ancient being existed as pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, and its communication came as harmonic vibrations that resonated through the bones of everyone present. The ethereal dominion was the oldest known civilization, and their representative commanded respect through sheer age and power. Matter is limitation, Veltar intoned, its form pulsing with colors that had no names. We transcended physical existence eons ago. The chamber filled with images of ships that looked like living light, their hulls composed of pure energy held in stable patterns. Our vessels exist in hyperspace. They cannot be touched by physical weapons. They cannot be destroyed by conventional means. They are thought made manifest. The display showed ethereal ships phasing in and out of normal space, striking targets with beams of concentrated reality before vanishing back into dimensions beyond physical reach. They moved like ghosts through enemy formations, untouchable and unstoppable dot in the corner of the chamber, largely ignored by the five great powers. Captain Jake Morrison of the human diplomatic vessel USS Defiance watched the demonstrations with quiet interest. Beside him, Dr. Lisa Bennett took notes on a simple tablet, her expression thoughtful as she observed the alien technologies. The humans were new to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago, and their presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. Morrison was a career military officer who had seen combat in the Martian rebellions and the asteroid belt conflicts, but he maintained the calm demeanor of a diplomat. His uniform was simple cloth and metal, primitive by galactic standards, but it was clean and pressed to perfection. Bennett was a xenobiologist who had spent most of her career studying the first alien artifacts discovered in the outer solar system. The five alien species barely acknowledged the human presence, treating them as curious primitives who had stumbled into a gathering of gods. When Crystal finally addressed Morrison directly, his tone was condescending and dismissive. "Human representative," the Zephyrian admiral said, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested amusement. "Your species has been evaluated by our respective intelligence services. Your vessels are constructed of simple metal alloys. Your weapons are chemical rockets and primitive energy beams. Your defensive systems are basic electromagnetic shields." He paused, allowing the other aliens to process this information. "Perhaps you would like to share your military capabilities with the Assembly?" Morrison stood slowly, his movement measured and deliberate. Around him, the five most powerful military forces in known space waited to hear what the primitive humans had to offer. The captain's expression remained neutral as he considered his response, knowing that his next words would determine the fate of not just his species, but potentially the entire galaxy. "Earth prefers peaceful solutions to conflicts," Morrison said simply. "However, we are prepared to defend ourselves and our allies if necessary." He paused, meeting the gaze of each alien representative in turn. "Our capabilities are adequate for our needs." The aliens exchanged glances that suggested they found human confidence both amusing and slightly irritating. They had no idea that they were about to learn why humanity had not just survived, but thrived in a galaxy full of predators. The tension in the chamber grew thicker as the five alien representatives began to circle each other like predators evaluating potential prey. What had started as a simple military demonstration was quickly evolving into something far more dangerous. Each species had revealed their most terrifying capabilities, and now they were beginning to realize that sharing such information might not have been wise. Admiral Crystal's crystalline form shifted through several different light spectrums as he processed the implications of what he had witnessed. The Zephyrian fleet's phase-shifting abilities were impressive, but the Vorthan bioships that could consume and grow stronger presented a direct counter to their strategy. If a Zephyrian ship remained solid long enough to fire its weapons, it could be grabbed and devoured by those writhing mechanical tentacles. War Commander Thalax seemed to have reached similar conclusions about his own vulnerabilities. His biomechanical armor rippled with nervous energy as he considered the Nexari swarm ships. Numbers had always been the great equalizer in warfare, and even the most powerful bioship could be overwhelmed by millions of coordinated attackers. The living metal beneath his skin crawled with anxiety as he calculated engagement scenarios in his mind. HiveMind Unit 7 flickered between states of matter more rapidly than before, its geometric patterns becoming increasingly complex as it processed multiple threat assessments simultaneously. The Nexari had always believed that unity was strength, but the Korvaxi ability to manipulate space-time itself meant that physical numbers might be meaningless. If the enemy could fold space to bring distant targets close or create gravity wells to crush entire swarms, what advantage did coordination provide? Admiral Zephyr's form continued to bend light in impossible ways, but her confidence was beginning to waver. The Korvaxi had mastered reality manipulation, but the ethereal dominion's existence in hyperspace presented challenges that even space-time control might not solve. How could you reshape reality to affect something that existed partially outside of reality itself? High ethereal Veltar pulsed with colors that suggested deep contemplation. The ancient being had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but the combination of technologies displayed here represented something new. Each species had developed solutions to specific problems, but together they formed a web of mutual destruction that even transcendent beings might find difficult to navigate. The five powers began to speak in more guarded tones, their earlier boasting replaced by careful diplomatic language. They were all thinking the same thing. Alone, each species was formidable, but together they could tear the galaxy apart. The question was whether they should work together or eliminate each other before the threats became too great to handle. Perhaps, Crystal said slowly, his voice like crystal bells in a gentle breeze, we should discuss territorial arrangements. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to claim suitable regions without conflict. His suggestion was reasonable on the surface, but everyone in the chamber understood the subtext. He was proposing they divide the galaxy among themselves rather than risk mutual annihilation. Thalax's massive form shifted as organic components beneath his armor reconfigured themselves. Territorial claims require enforcement, he rumbled. The Vorthan Empire has always preferred to negotiate from positions of strength. His biomechanical systems were already calculating optimal fleet positions for a potential multi-front war. The Nexari representatives' light patterns became more aggressive, sharp angles replacing flowing curves. Unity cannot be divided, it declared. Territory is meaningless when consciousness can exist in multiple locations simultaneously. The implication was clear: the Nexari would not be contained by arbitrary boundaries. Zephyr's form rippled like water as she considered the logistics of a galactic partition. Space is relative, she said, her voice echoing from impossible directions. Boundaries drawn on maps have no meaning when reality can be reshaped at will. The Korvaxi had never recognized limitations imposed by others. Veltar's crystalline matrix pulsed with ancient wisdom. Civilizations rise and fall like waves upon the shore, the being intoned. What matters is not territory claimed, but existence preserved. The ethereal dominion had survived by adapting to changing circumstances, not by clinging to fixed positions. As the alien representatives debated the future of galactic civilization, they gradually began to focus on a common problem: what to do about the newer species that had recently achieved interstellar travel. The galaxy was not empty of other life forms, and these primitive races represented potential complications to any territorial arrangement. The human species presents an interesting case, Crichton observed, his attention turning toward Morrison. And Bennett. They have achieved faster-than-light travel, but their technology remains primitive. They could serve as useful intermediaries between our respective territories. Morrison maintained his diplomatic expression, but Bennett shifted slightly in her seat. She had been listening to the alien conversation with growing concern, realizing that humanity was being discussed like a resource to be managed rather than a species to be respected. Thelex's biomechanical systems focused on the humans with predatory interest. Their biological composition is suitable for integration into our growth systems, he noted with clinical detachment. Human neural patterns could enhance our bioship intelligence networks. The Nexari representative's form brightened as it processed this information. Organic consciousness can be digitized and incorporated into collective systems, it observed. Human thought patterns might provide useful diversity to our unified mind. Zephyr's space warping abilities allowed her to examine the humans from multiple angles simultaneously. Their psychological profiles indicate strong adaptation capabilities, she reported. They could serve as effective administrators for territories requiring direct management. Veltar's ancient perspective encompassed longer timelines than the others. Young species often develop unexpected capabilities, the being warned. Premature integration may waste potential resources. The five powers began to discuss humanity's fate with the casual indifference of gods deciding the future of ants. They debated whether humans would be more useful as servants, resources, or simply eliminated as a potential future nuisance. The conversation was conducted in academic terms, but the underlying threat was unmistakable. Morrison listened to the discussion with growing anger, though his training kept his expression neutral. These beings were talking about enslaving or destroying his entire species as if it were a minor administrative decision. Beside him, Bennett was taking notes on her tablet, her fingers moving with increased urgency as she documented the alien threat assessments. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with each species proposing different uses for humanity and other primitive races. The Zephyrians wanted tributary states to provide resources for their crystalline cities. The Vorthans saw biological material for their growing fleets. The Nexari desired new consciousness to absorb into their collective. The Korvaxi needed administrators for their reality-warped territories. The Ethereals viewed young species as potential test subjects for transcendence experiments. Finally, Admiral Krickstall called for a formal decision. The human representative is present, he noted. Perhaps we should inform them of our conclusions and allow them to choose their preferred arrangement. The chamber fell silent as all attention focused on Morrison. The captain stood slowly, his movement deliberate and measured. He had listened to 5 of the most powerful species in the galaxy debate the fate of humanity as if they were dividing up a meal. His response would determine whether his species faced slavery, extinction, or something even worse. Before we discuss arrangements, Morrison said carefully, perhaps the Council would be interested in observing human defensive capabilities. We would be honored to demonstrate our readiness to contribute to galactic security. The aliens exchanged glances that suggested they found human presumption both amusing and slightly irritating. They had just finished displaying technologies that could reshape reality itself, and the primitive humans wanted to show off their chemical rockets and metal ships. The request was so absurd that it was almost entertaining. Very well, Crichton said, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested condescending amusement. We will observe your demonstration before finalizing our decision regarding humanity's future role in galactic civilization. Morrison nodded politely, but his eyes had gone cold. The aliens had just made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that because human technology appeared primitive, human capabilities were equally limited. They were about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving indeed. The chamber's atmosphere shifted as the 5 alien representatives settled into their observation positions. each species confident that they were about to witness a quaint display of primitive technology. The viewing screens activated, showing the space around the Galactic Council station where the human demonstration would take place. In the distance, several small objects moved slowly toward the station, their simple metal hulls catching the light of the distant star. Admiral Krikstal's crystalline form sparkled with what might have been amusement as he observed the approaching human vessels. 12 ships, he noted, his voice carrying the tone of someone commenting on an interesting but ultimately insignificant curiosity. Their hulls appear to be constructed from basic steel alloys with ceramic armor plating. Quite primitive, but perhaps adequate for their level of technological development. War Commander Thalak's biomechanical systems had automatically begun analyzing the human ships, and his organic components writhed with what passed for laughter among his species. Their largest vessel is barely 300 meters in length, he observed. The Vorthan Empire's smallest bioship is 10 times that size. These are not warships, but toys. The Nexari representative flickered through several light patterns that indicated dismissive calculation. 12 units against our combined fleets of millions, it stated. The mathematical probability of human success approaches 0 regardless of their tactical capabilities. Admiral Zephra's space warping abilities allowed her to examine the human ships from angles that should have been impossible, looking at them from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their technology is linear, she reported with the confidence of someone who had mastered reality manipulation. They think in terms of forward momentum and direct application of force. They have not learned to bend space to their will. High ethereal Veltar pulsed with colors that suggested ancient patience. Young species often display courage that exceeds their capabilities, the being observed. It is both admirable and tragic. We shall witness their efforts with appropriate respect before proceeding with more practical matters. Morrison stood calmly beside the viewing screen, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed military posture. His expression remained neutral, but Dr. Bennett noticed the slight tension in his shoulders that indicated he was preparing for something significant. She had worked with the captain long enough to recognize the signs of controlled anticipation. The lead human vessel moved into position at the center of the demonstration area, its simple hull reflecting the station's lights. The ship looked exactly like what it was, a metal construct built by a species that had learned to work with basic materials and straightforward engineering principles. There were no exotic energies, no reality warping effects, no signs of advanced technology beyond conventional faster-than-light drives. USS Defiance to Galactic Council Station. Morrison's voice came through the communication system. We are ready to begin the demonstration. Please maintain safe distance as requested. The aliens exchanged glances that suggested they found human caution both unnecessary and slightly insulting. Safe distance from what? The primitive ships barely registered on their advanced sensors as potential threats. Bennett activated her tablet and began what appeared to be routine note-taking, but her fingers were actually entering a complex series of commands. The tablet was connected to the USS Defiance's communication array, and she was sending encrypted signals to the human fleet waiting in the outer system. Human representative, Krikstal said, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested polite boredom. Please proceed with your demonstration. We are eager to observe your defensive capabilities before returning to more pressing matters. Morrison nodded and spoke into his communication device. Admiral Wells, you are cleared to proceed. Show them what we brought. The space around the demonstration area suddenly filled with new contacts as 11 more human ships dropped out of faster than light travel. They appeared with the characteristic flash of emerging from hyperspace, their hulls dark against the stars. Each ship was similar in design to the USS Defiance, built from the same basic materials and following the same straightforward engineering principles. The aliens observed the arrival with mild interest. 12 ships had become 12 ships, which changed nothing about the fundamental tactical situation. The humans still possessed no obvious advantages in terms of technology or numbers. Impressive coordination, Talax noted with the tone of someone offering encouragement to a child. Your ships maintain proper formation discipline. This suggests adequate training in basic fleet operations. The Nexari representative's light patterns shifted to indicate mathematical recalculation. 12 units confirmed, it stated. Tactical assessment unchanged. Human forces remain insufficient for meaningful resistance against any of our individual fleets. Morrison's expression remained calm, but Bennett caught the slight smile that crossed his lips. The aliens were focusing on the wrong variables, analyzing the human ships as if they were simply larger versions of the fighters and corvettes they were familiar with. They had no understanding of what they were actually looking at. Admiral Wells, Morrison said into his communication device, please begin Phase 1 of the demonstration. The human ships began to move with a precision that caught the aliens' attention. Instead of the loose formations typically used by most species, the 12 vessels arranged themselves in a complex, three-dimensional pattern that seemed to serve no obvious tactical purpose. Each ship maintained exact distances from its neighbors, creating a geometric structure that hung in space like a work of art. Interesting formation, Zephyra observed, her space warping abilities allowing her to analyze the pattern from multiple perspectives. The mathematical relationships suggest some form of tactical doctrine, though the purpose is unclear. Dr. Bennett continued her note-taking, but her tablet was now receiving data streams from all 12 human ships. The aliens assumed she was documenting their observations, but she was actually monitoring the fleet's preparation status. Every system was coming online exactly as planned. The lead ship, USS Sovereign, began broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Simultaneously, the message was simple and direct. This is Admiral Patricia Wells of the United Earth Fleet. We are conducting a defensive capability demonstration for the Galactic Council. All non-participating vessels should maintain minimum safe distance of 10,000 kilometers. The aliens found this announcement both amusing and presumptuous. 10,000 kilometers was an enormous distance in space combat, far beyond the range of most conventional weapons. The humans seemed to be preparing for something that required vast amounts of empty space, which made no sense given their primitive technology. Perhaps, Crickstall suggested with crystalline amusement, the humans planned to demonstrate their chemical rockets. Such weapons might indeed require significant safety margins due to their unpredictable nature. The human ships continued their preparation, running what appeared to be routine system checks. Power readings remained within normal parameters, and there were no signs of exotic energy buildup or reality manipulation. The vessels looked exactly like what they appeared to be, simple metal constructs operating within the known laws of physics. Morrison finally turned to address the alien representatives directly. Before we proceed, he said, Dr. Bennett would like to provide some context for what you are about to observe. She has studied human military history and can explain our approach to defensive operations. Bennett stood and activated her tablet's projection system, displaying a simple star chart. Human civilization developed through constant conflict, she began, her voice carrying the tone of an academic lecture. Unlike species that achieved unity before reaching the stars, humans spent millennia fighting each other on a single world. The aliens listened with polite attention, assuming this was some form of primitive ritual that needed to be observed before the actual demonstration could begin. They had heard similar speeches from other young species about their warlike past, usually offered as explanations for their eventual peaceful nature. This constant warfare taught us several important lessons, Bennett continued. First, that superior technology does not guarantee victory. Second, that the most dangerous opponent is one who has learned to fight thinking enemies. Third, that the best weapon is often the one your opponent does not expect. The aliens began to pay closer attention, sensing that this academic presentation might be more relevant than they had initially assumed. There was something in the human female's tone that suggested she was not merely reciting historical facts but preparing them for something specific. Human military doctrine is based on a simple principle, Bennett concluded. Every system we build, every tactic we develop, every strategy we employ is designed with one goal: to defeat other humans. We do not fight animals or natural disasters. We fight ourselves. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement began to sink in. The aliens had developed their technologies to overcome environmental challenges or to assert dominance over primitive species. But humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to defeat opponents who were exactly as intelligent and resourceful as themselves. Morrison, not first sign that something was different, came when the human ships began moving in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. Instead of maintaining safe distances and predictable formations, they started weaving between each other in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. Each vessel moved with precision that suggested not just coordination but actual awareness of what every other ship was doing at all times. Admiral Krikstal's crystalline form flickered as his sensors tried to track the complex movements. Their navigation systems must be far more sophisticated than our initial scans indicated, he observed, though uncertainty crept into his voice like hairline cracks in crystal. No species should be able to maintain such precise positioning at those velocities without collision. The USS Sovereign suddenly accelerated toward a cluster of asteroids that had been positioned as targets for the demonstration. The other human ships moved to support positions that seemed random until the first weapon fired. A simple kinetic projectile launched from the Sovereign's forward railgun, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed toward a target asteroid roughly the size of a small building. War Commander Delax's biomechanical systems automatically calculated the trajectory and impact probability. Basic kinetic weapon, he rumbled with dismissive confidence. Adequate accuracy for such primitive technology, though the targeting system appears to be more advanced than we initially assessed. The projectile struck the asteroid with perfect precision, but instead of simply destroying the target, it carved out a precise geometric pattern in the rock face. The impact had been calculated to remove exact amounts of material, leaving behind a shape that looked like mathematical art carved in stone. The level of precision required for such an achievement suggested targeting systems far beyond what should have been possible with human technology. The Nexari representative's light patterns shifted to indicate rapid recalculation. Accuracy deviation, 0.001%, it reported. Mathematical surprise evident in its rapidly changing geometric forms. This level of precision requires computational power approaching our collective processing capabilities. Before the aliens could fully process the implications of the first shot, the USS Thunderbolt fired a second projectile at a different asteroid. This shot came from an impossible angle, curving through space in a trajectory that seemed to bend around gravitational fields that should not have existed. The projectile struck its target with the same mathematical precision, carving another geometric pattern that complemented the first. Admiral Zephyr's space warping abilities allowed her to analyze the projectile's path in detail, and what she discovered sent ripples of concern through her reality-bending form. The trajectory modification was not caused by external gravitational manipulation, she reported with growing unease. The projectile itself adjusted its course during flight. Dr. Bennett continued taking notes on her tablet, but she was actually monitoring the fleet's performance data. Every shot was hitting within tolerances that would have been considered impossible just 50 years ago, but human weapons technology had advanced in ways that the aliens could not have predicted from their basic scans of Earth's solar system. The human ships continued their demonstration with increasing complexity. Multiple vessels began firing simultaneously at different targets, their projectiles weaving past each other in space without collision. The coordination required was staggering, suggesting that each ship was not just aware of its own weapons, but tracking every projectile fired by every other vessel in real time. Captain Steve Rodriguez aboard the USS Thunderbolt demonstrated the next phase by engaging a moving target. One of the asteroids had been fitted with simple thrusters to make it tumble unpredictably through space. The captain's ship tracked the chaotic movement for several seconds before firing a burst of smaller projectiles that struck the target. In sequence, each impact precisely timed to slow its rotation until it hung motionless in space. High ethereal Veltar's ancient consciousness focused intently on the display, colors pulsing through its crystalline matrix in patterns that indicated deep analysis. The computational requirements for such real-time trajectory calculation exceed the processing power we detected in their ship systems, the being observed. Either our scans were incomplete or they are using processing methods we do not understand. Morrison stood calmly beside the viewing screen, but his eyes held a new intensity that Dr. Bennett recognized from their previous missions together. The captain was watching the alien representatives more closely than the demonstration itself, gauging their reactions and calculating how much more revelation they could handle before the situation became dangerous. The human fleet moved into the next phase of their demonstration by showcasing their defensive capabilities. The USS Vengeance, commanded by Captain Helen Price, positioned itself near a cluster of target drones that began firing harmless but detectable energy beams in random directions. The ship's defensive systems activated with a complexity that made the aliens pay much closer attention. Instead of simple energy shields or armor plating, the human vessel deployed multiple layers of defense that worked together in ways none of the alien species had seen before. Point defense weapons tracked and intercepted incoming fire with accuracy that bordered on supernatural. Energy deflection systems not only absorbed incoming beams but redirected them toward other targets with precision that suggested each shot was being individually analyzed and countered. The Zephyrian Admiral's crystalline form began resonating at frequencies that indicated stress as he watched the human ship handle multiple attack vectors simultaneously. Their defensive integration is beyond anything in our tactical databases, Krikstal admitted reluctantly. Each system appears to be designed to complement and enhance the others rather than operating independently. Commander Ryan Torres aboard. The USS Defiance activated the next demonstration phase, and suddenly the space around the human fleet filled with electronic noise that made the alien sensors struggle to maintain clear readings. The humans were not just jamming communications but actively spoofing sensor data, making their ships appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously while masking their true positions. War Commander Thalax's biomechanical systems writhed with frustration as they failed to maintain target locks on the human vessels. Electronic warfare capabilities far exceed our initial assessment, he reported, organic components beneath his armor shifting patterns in obvious agitation. They are not just blocking our sensors but feeding false information designed to confuse our targeting systems. The demonstration escalated again as the human ships began working together in ways that challenged everything the aliens thought they knew about fleet coordination. Instead of operating as individual units following orders from a central command, each ship seemed to anticipate what the others would do and adapt its own actions accordingly. They moved like a single organism with 12 bodies, each part aware of and responsive to all the others. The USS Sovereign demonstrated this coordination by launching a complex attack pattern against multiple targets simultaneously. Other ships provided covering fire, electronic support, and tactical positioning without any apparent communication between vessels. The attack succeeded with mechanical precision, but the aliens realized that the coordination had been too fast and too complex for traditional command structures. Hive mind. Unit 7's light patterns became increasingly agitated as it processed what it was observing. Individual consciousness operating as collective unity, it reported with what might have been confusion in a species that thought it had mastered group thinking. They maintained separate decision-making processes while achieving coordination levels approaching our own collective efficiency. Admiral Zephra's reality warping abilities detected something even more disturbing. The human ships were not just coordinating their current actions but seemed to be planning multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. Each vessel was prepared for dozens of different contingencies, ready to adapt to changing situations faster than most species could even recognize that change had occurred. Dr. Bennett closed her tablet and looked up at the alien representatives, noting the subtle changes in their postures and expressions that indicated growing concern. The demonstration was having its intended effect, but she knew that Captain Morrison was preparing to reveal something that would fundamentally change how these species viewed humanity. The human fleet suddenly stopped all movement and hung motionless. In space, 12 ships arranged in a formation that seemed both random and precisely calculated. The aliens waited for the next phase of the demonstration, but instead they heard Admiral Wells's voice broadcasting on all frequencies. "Phase 1 of the demonstration is complete," Wells announced calmly. "We have shown you our basic coordination, accuracy, and defensive capabilities using conventional weapons and tactics. Phase 2 will demonstrate why human military doctrine is fundamentally different from anything you have encountered before." Morrison turned to face the alien representatives, directly, his diplomatic mask finally slipping to reveal the steel underneath. "What you—" The silence in the chamber stretched like a taut wire as the alien representatives processed what they had just heard. Phase 2 was about to begin, and suddenly none of them were certain they wanted to see what human combat protocols actually looked like. The casual confidence they had displayed earlier was evaporating like mist in sunlight. Admiral Wells's voice came through the communication system again, but now it carried a different tone. Gone was the polite formality of diplomatic demonstration. What remained was the calm authority of someone who had spent decades learning how to destroy other thinking beings. "All vessels, engage reality anchor protocols. Full spectrum jamming authorized. Combat AI systems online." The space around the human fleet suddenly changed in ways that made the alien sensors scream warnings. The USS Sovereign activated something that the aliens had never encountered before, a field that prevented spacetime manipulation within a radius of several thousand kilometers. Admiral Zephyra felt her reality-warping abilities simply stop working, as if the universe itself had become rigid and unyielding. "Impossible," Zephyra whispered, her form flickering with distress as she tried and failed to bend space around the human ships. "Reality manipulation is a fundamental force. It cannot be simply turned off." War Commander Thalax S. Biomechanical Systems registered the next change as quantum scramblers came online throughout the human fleet. The energy signatures that allowed the ethereal dominion to exist partially in hyperspace began to fluctuate wildly. High ethereal Veltar S crystalline matrix pulsed with colors that indicated something approaching panic as its connection to higher dimensions was systematically disrupted. "Our hyperspace interface is being blocked," Veltar reported, ancient confidence cracking like ice under pressure. "These humans possess technology that interferes with dimensional transcendence itself." The USS Thunderbolt revealed the next layer of human preparation as bioviral warfare systems activated. Microscopic packages designed specifically to corrupt organic technology began spreading through space, seeking any biological signatures that might indicate Vorthan bioships. Thalax felt his own biomechanical components recoil as his systems detected the approaching viral agents. "Biological warfare designed to target mechanical-organic hybrid systems," Thalax reported with growing alarm. "They have created weapons specifically designed to corrupt our bioship technology." Hive Mind Unit 7 discovered that the humans had prepared for collective consciousness as well. Network disruption fields began interfering with the quantum entanglement that allowed the Nexari to maintain their group mind. Individual ships within the Nexari swarm would find themselves cut off from the collective, forced to operate as separate entities without the unified thinking that made them so dangerous. The Nexari representatives' light patterns became chaotic as it struggled to maintain cohesion. "Collective consciousness interference detected," it reported with what passed for fear among beings of pure thought. "They possess the ability to fragment unified minds." Admiral Krickstall watched in growing horror as phase disruption fields activated around the human ships. The Zephyrian ability to shift between dimensions was being systematically countered by technology that forced matter to remain locked in normal space. His crystalline ships would be unable to phase through enemy attacks, leaving them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Phase-shifting capabilities neutralized, Crystal announced, his voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. They have developed countermeasures for dimensional phase technology. Dr. Bennett looked up from her tablet and addressed the alien representatives directly. Human military doctrine is based on a simple assumption, she said, her academic tone somehow more terrifying than any battle cry. Every enemy we face will be intelligent, adaptive, and capable of learning from their mistakes. Therefore, every weapon we build must be designed to defeat opponents who know exactly what we are going to do. Morrison stepped forward, his diplomatic mask completely gone now. What remained was a warrior who had spent his entire career learning how to kill other humans, beings exactly as smart and resourceful as himself. Each of your species developed impressive technologies to overcome specific limitations, he said calmly. But you developed them in isolation, fighting enemies who could not adapt to counter your advantages. The human fleet began moving again. But now their coordination took on a predatory quality that made the aliens step back from the viewing screens. 12 ships moved like a pack of hunters who had identified their prey and were positioning themselves for the kill. Every movement was calculated, every position chosen to maximize tactical advantage while minimizing vulnerability. Captain Rodriguez demonstrated human tactical adaptation by engaging a series of target drones that had been programmed to use the same defensive patterns as Zephyrian phase ships. The drones attempted to shift between dimensions to avoid incoming fire, but the reality anchor fields kept them locked in normal space where human weapons could reach them. Each drone was destroyed with casual efficiency. Commander Helen Price showed how humans dealt with swarm tactics by engaging thousands of micro-drones programmed to mimic Nixari coordination patterns. Instead of trying to destroy each individual unit, her ship used network disruption to break their collective thinking, then picked off the confused individual drones with point defense systems designed to track millions of targets simultaneously. The USS Vengeance engaged targets that mimicked Vorthan bioship behavior, using bioviral weapons to corrupt their organic components before finishing them with conventional fire. The demonstration showed that humans had developed specific countermeasures for every alien technology they had observed. Admiral Wells's voice cut through the growing tension. What you are witnessing is not superior technology, she announced. It is superior integration. Every human ship, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine has been designed by people who understand that the most dangerous enemy is one who thinks exactly like you do. Morrison turned to face the alien representatives, and they saw something in his eyes that made ancient beings who had conquered galaxies take involuntary steps backward. You developed your technologies to be superior to everything you had encountered before, he said quietly. We developed ours to be superior to ourselves. The demonstration reached its climax as the human fleet executed a coordinated attack against targets representing all 5 alien technologies simultaneously. Reality anchors prevented space-time manipulation while quantum scramblers disrupted energy-based constructs. Bioviral weapons corrupted organic systems while network disruptors fragmented collective consciousness. Phase disruption fields locked targets in normal space where conventional weapons finished the job. The attack succeeded with mechanical precision, every alien technology countered by human preparation. But the most terrifying aspect was not the effectiveness of the countermeasures, but the casual efficiency with which they were employed. The humans were not struggling to overcome superior alien technology. They were simply applying lessons learned from centuries of fighting other humans. The galaxy contains approximately 2 billion intelligent species, Dr. Bennett said, closing her tablet with a soft click. 99.9% of them achieved interstellar travel through cooperation and unity. They learned to build. Rather than destroy, they chose exploration over conquest. Morrison's expression remained calm, but his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Humanity is the 0.1% that reached the stars through warfare. We are the species that learn to fight ourselves and survive. Every weapon we build, every tactic we develop, every strategy we employ assumes that our enemy is exactly as intelligent and resourceful as we are. The alien representatives stood in stunned silence as they processed the implications. They had spent eons developing technologies to overcome natural limitations and primitive species. But humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to defeat opponents who possessed the same intelligence, the same adaptability, and the same desperate will to survive that they did. Admiral Krikstal was the first to speak, his crystalline voice carrying harmonics of defeat. "Withdrawal of Zephyrian territorial claims," he announced formally. "The Eternal Fleet will return to our home systems and pursue diplomatic solutions to any future conflicts." War Commander Thalax's biomechanical armor writhed as organic components reconfigured themselves for retreat rather than attack. "The Vorthan Empire seeks peaceful coexistence," he rumbled, his predatory confidence replaced by careful respect. One by one, each alien species formally withdrew their conquest plans and requested diplomatic negotiations instead of military action. They had finally understood that while they might possess superior individual technologies, humans possessed something far more dangerous: the knowledge of how to fight enemies, who were just as smart as they were. Morrison nodded politely and resumed his diplomatic demeanor, but the message had been delivered. Humanity was not a primitive species to be conquered or managed. They were the apex predators of warfare itself, shaped by millions of years of conflict into the most dangerous opponents the galaxy had ever seen.